Read, prépare la potion magique. Il y a les Romains. Les Romains.
Hello and welcome to Comic Book Movie Oblivion, the podcast about feature films based on comic books and comic strips that people have stopped talking about. We are your hosts, Jordan and Kumar. That's me.
Are they?
I almost did that joke, and I forgot as I was reading. I was thinking about it all week. Okay, this week we were talking...
Just as long as you don't do the Roman salute.
Yes. Yeah. Oh my God, don't get me going on that Roman salute. This week we are talking about Asterix and Obelix versus Caesar from 1999.
So we are.
We'll talk a little bit about the books, which I had a little bit of exposure to as a kid because all the French immersion kids would read them in French. So I'd go over to other kids' houses and they would have piles of Asterix books hanging around, which I could not read because they were in French.
Right.
But those kids tended to read those, so I had a bit of exposure to them, but not much. And I think I've only ever actually owned one, and I went looking for it this week, and I couldn't find it.
Well, I never owned one, but I had enormous exposure to Asterix and Obelix. Asterix and Obelix was in every library.
Yes.
Growing up. Every library.
I actually tried looking in the library this week, our local, and they don't have it.
Not anymore.
No.
I guess it's gone out of fashion, but when I was a kid, certainly every school library...
Right.
Every local library had Asterix and Obelix, and to a lesser extent, Tintin. I don't know why.
Well, I know why. It's because 393 million copies sold in 111 languages. That's why.
Yeah. Librarians must have considered Asterix and Obelix to be an acceptable...
In fact, Ashton told me they were in his school library.
Yep.
At the... elementary school library, I believe.
Yep, I believe it, because they certainly were when I was growing up. I read them all, dozens of times.
Right, okay.
So reading Asterix and Obelix this week, I often found myself...
You knew the gags and stuff.
I often found myself following along with remembering panels.
Yep.
Remembering things that Cacophonix the Bard was singing.
Yep, okay.
And it was a strange experience reading it too, as an adult, having since learned a lot of the references.
Right.
Becoming familiar with a lot of the songs.
Yeah, we'll talk about all... Because there's a lot of Latin in here, Latin jokes.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's ranks of Romans that I was like, what is that? Is that higher than that rank? Or stuff like that. There's all that kind of stuff is in there. It's pretty advanced for what it was. It was in Pilote magazine. Started serialization in 1959. We're going to be doing several Pilote episodes because Mobius's Blueberry was serialized in Pilote, and Lucky Luke, Valerian and Lorelei, Valerian and maybe it's Lorelei, and Is No Good, which is another Goscinny strip.
Yes.
So those have all got movies. They'll be coming up on the show at some stage. Its rival was... the one with Smurfs and Tintin in it, the Belgian one, which I can't remember the title at the moment, but we'll worry about that when we get to those episodes. So it started in 1959. It was written by a guy named René Goscinny.
Yes.
And he wrote 24 volumes until he passed away in 1977. The artist was Albert Uderzo, and he took over the writing. So he's doing both, and he did about 10 volumes on his own until 2009. And now they've got kind of a look-alike team that's been putting out books. But they were kind of out one or two a year during the Goscinny Uderzo years.
From 66 to 77, I think. So about 11 years, and they were fairly prolific. Yeah. And the books from those years are really good.
Yes, absolutely.
That's the peak kind of Asterix.
Yes, yeah.
Uderzo did a pretty good job, but they're not as good as a writer as Goscinny, I think.
Right. So by my count, there's 15 to 18 movies.
Yeah.
Mostly animated.
Yes.
We've had 5 live-action movies.
Even 5 is an astonishing number.
It is a large number, but surprising to me that we didn't get the first one until 1999. Considering we've sold hundreds of millions of these things and everybody in Europe knows Asterix, it seems to me it took a very long time before a live-action one. They were making live-action Tintin movies very early on.
Really?
They were trying in the 50s and 60s. They were making Tintin movies.
I don't have a concrete answer for this. I did read the French Wikipedia page. They do mention that there were a couple of attempts to get Asterix movies off the ground over the years. but they just seem to have never really gone anywhere.
Yeah, right.
I don't know why.
Yeah.
I can't imagine it's a special effect. Well, perhaps
it
doesn't feel like a special effects limitation. You don't really need a lot of effects.
No.
You just need the kind of dramatic flying around from the punching, I suppose, when the super strength Gauls start punching Romans. But no, I suppose it's just one of those things. Yeah. It's just always easier to do animation, I guess.
Right. And we've had, there have been 2 CGI movies, 2 full CGI movies, and there's another one coming up like next year or the year as well. So that's like the range of movies. So there's like, let's say 10 animations, 5 live action, 2 or 3 CG, something like that. I
don't know. I mean, do you think it's like Peanuts where just the physiognomy of the characters doesn't lend itself well to live action? You need a big fat guy. You need a tiny little guy that's half the height of a big fat guy.
We'll talk about all that kind of stuff, when we get to the movie. That's a big part of what this movie's about.
Brilliant.
I almost was going to do this episode back in August when Alain Delon passed away because he's Caesar. Caesar's a different actor in every movie, like John Connor in the Terminator movies. It's a different actor every time, and he was in one of them. And I was like, oh, we should get to.
But a different actor plays Asterix a lot of the time too.
Yes, but
the only constant is Gérard Depardieu as Obelix.
Until the 5th one, and then it's a different one, a different actor. But then at the time there was like, we hadn't covered the first 4, so I thought, we'll leave it because he's in the 4th or something like that.
We can't do that.
Also, I've been using this is my current notebook. I hand write my notes for this podcast, and I've had this Asterix and Obelix very lovely notebook for months now. I don't know what the first episode in here was, but I thought, we better get to this before
you
I use up this
notebook, and
before I put it in the recycling.
You're about 9/10 of the way through, so it's
here was the first episode I put in this book. Anyway. Okay, so these books were translated by Anthea Bell and Derek Hockridge. There's apparently a revision to the translations in 2004. They're amazing translations. This is a nightmare job.
Here, so
real nightmare job. I wouldn't want to have to deal with. They've localized, quote unquote, the Roman names so that the gags make sense in English.
I must admit, reading it, I always kind of got it as a kid, but reading it as an adult and reading the humor behind the Romans' names, they'll be called things like anorexia and
or Christmas bonus. So all the Gauls have names that end with ix.
Yeah,
the druid is Getafix.
Yep.
And Cacophonix, we mentioned, the bard.
Yep.
The dog is named Dogmatix.
Yep.
All of the Romans have Latin-sounding names, like Bigisticus.
Yep.
They have...
Detritus is one.
Detritus, is one. That
Christmas bonus from the first one.
Yeah. I couldn't write them all down.
There's
everyone
and
has
they're
a joke
all
name.
hilarious and ridiculous. And clearly different in English as they are from French. So it must have been an absolute labour of love by the translating team.
Yes. And
I've got a list.
Okay.
If you're interested. Now,
but before we get to the list, the thing I want to mention is when you meet other people, like the Goths, they have their own naming conventions as well. Yeah. Like their names end with some different sort of ending.
Yeah, so they all end in IC.
Yes, that's right.
Like Alaric or a different...
Rhetoric was the translator.
Well, Alaric is a real historical one.
Yes.
So they'll all, like rhetoric is... Choleric.
The Greek I loved one was economic crisis. Economic crisis. Yeah. Oh, he's a Phoenician actually, but okay. List off some of those names.
All right. So I've got this one's about a translation essentially. So in most languages, Asterix and Obelix stay the same because typically the word Asterix tends to be the same in whatever language, referring to the symbol of the star, right? Obelisk, obviously a reference to the Egyptian...
The obelisk.
Yeah, the obelisk.
Yes, and he carries those obelisks around on his back.
He carries menhirs, but they look similar enough to obelisks that it makes sense. He's a menhir delivery man.
Yes. Which is a great joke in itself. Like, how many does he possibly need to deliver? And he's constantly...
There's a whole episode, there's a whole volume about menhirs becoming like the hot commodity in Rome.
Right.
And there's all these economic jokes about it where they eventually, the economy crashes because it's oversaturated with too many menhirs and they're completely useless, obviously. They even have advertising for them. It's so funny. We'll get into that. Part of the humour of the comics is its satire of modern life, essentially. I mean, as you mentioned, the dog is called Idefix.
Okay.
So in an idée fixe.
Is that a fixed ideology?
Yeah, exactly.
Right, okay.
Yeah. And of course, that's similar enough to a dogma.
Yeah.
But then they've made
absolutely.
it dogmatics.
They made a dog into dogmatics. Yeah.
Get a fix. As a kid, I didn't get it, but it's presumably a reference to the drug-like nature of the magic potion, which I think is wacky.
Yeah.
It has been translated into American, and they actually changed get a fix to something else.
Really?
When I say it was there was an American English translation where I think it ran in a newspaper briefly, and they didn't like get a fix.
Huh. Interesting. Okay.
They changed it like Magic Manix or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Less good. His name in French is Panoramix.
Okay.
Just from panoramic.
Is that like maybe is it like or a kaleidoscopic drug experience?
Oh, that didn't occur to me. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's what they were thinking of. The chief is called Vital Statistics.
Yes. Yes.
Which is really good.
Yeah.
In French, his name is Abrara-Curix.
Okay.
Which apparently means to hit or lambast violently.
Huh. Okay.
Again, that would be a really challenging one. So I've just gone in a completely different direction
you have to
make it sound like polling.
Yeah.
Geriatrix, the old man with the hot young wife.
Yes.
In French, his name is Age Canonix, which just means canonical age.
Right. Okay.
Funny, but is it as funny as geriatrics?
No.
So maybe some of these I read, and obviously I'm biased because I speak English and not French, but it seems some of them are improvements.
Yeah.
Take, for example, the name of the fishmonger.
Yeah.
So in French, his name is Ordre Alphabétique.
Okay.
Which just means alphabetical order.
Has nothing to do with fish.
Whereas in his English name is Unhygienics.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And the wife of the fishmonger is called Yellow Submarine.
Okay.
Yellow Submarine.
Right.
But in her, I guess what you would call British name, the English translation by the British translators, is Bacteria.
Right, that's a good one.
So I can't help but feel sometimes we might have got an even better version in English than perhaps the original French.
Yeah, probably bits and pieces of it.
Bits and pieces.
But it's amazingly visual as well. It's all the visual gags. I mean, like Vital Statistics is always being carried around on a shield.
Yes.
As if it's kind of palanquin. It's we'll talk about the art a little as we go through it, but it's really it's a cartoony, what we call Bigfoot cartooning style, but like super energetic and just from volume one, just knows exactly what he's doing. There's no stumbling around with the art. It's really beautiful, and everyone is kind of a caricature. Everybody has a very distinct face.
Yes, you can't mistake one character for another.
And different body language. It's all really very clearly defined.
Everyone's different shape and completely anatomically wild shapes. Like Asterix is a dwarf, about half the height of everybody else. He has an enormous bulbous nose.
Yeah.
Vital Statistics is a big sphere.
Yeah.
With a smaller sphere on top.
Yes.
Other people have more, I guess, standard proportions.
Yeah.
Or a big squares. And then Obelix sort of starts narrow and then bellows out like a pear. Yeah. Perfect description.
Yeah. And the backgrounds are really detailed. Like all the nature, the buildings and stuff are all really done in a very detailed way. Not a little bit cartoony, but it's a little bit like Scott McCloud and Understand Comics had this concept he called masking, which is where you have realistic backgrounds and cartoony characters so that the reader can project themselves in easily. I don't necessarily believe that, but I think it's a strategy that's used in Tintin. It's also here where there's almost never a panel without a background. It's almost always there. Maybe once or twice. Yeah, every couple of pages.
They're never on the white.
Yeah, very rarely.
So many comics we've done.
Yeah.
Red Rider or any number of others where they don't often have a back. They're often it's just figures against a white background. Apparently, Uderzo was famous for these backgrounds, which he would mostly draw from imagination.
Right.
In fact, there's a story that you'll read that he drew apparently a crossroads or a harbour so perfectly that people would write to him and say, "Wow, you did a really great job representing that place."
Yes.
And he'd never seen it.
Right.
He'd just drawn such a detailed feature that people could, I guess, put
Yes.
Yeah.
I believe it. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the story here. So it's set in 50 BC.
Yeah. An eternal 50 BC, so all the adventures occur in 50 BC.
It's all like Judge Dredd. It never goes past. The Romans have taken over Gaul. They've occupied the entire region except for one little village, which is surrounded by 5 Roman settlements called Compendium, Laudunum, Totarum, Aquarium, and another one.
It's Totarum.
Yes.
Like a drink of rum.
Totarum. Okay, gotcha.
There's only 4, actually. There isn't a 5th.
4, okay. And but they cannot defeat this little village, and they don't know why. But we very quickly learn that the reason this village is able to protect itself, I don't know if you ever... Does this village have a name? I don't think it does.
It doesn't, no.
No. They have their druid, Getafix, mixes a magic potion for them.
Yes.
Which gives them...
superhuman strength.
Superhuman strength. Now, I immediately, as I was reading this, saw, it's only Asterix gets a potion. No, the whole village gets a potion. Obelix, unfortunately, fell into the potion when he was a baby, and now he has permanent super strength. So he's not allowed to have any more of the potion for whatever reason, but he doesn't need
because he's permanently on the potion. He
doesn't need to refuel.
In one edition, he is given a little bit of the potion.
Okay.
When they need to escape, I think from a pyramid.
Okay.
And apparently, because it's all solid stone, the druid says he can have 1 drop, and it supercharges him to such an extent that he's able to charge through. Incidentally, some expressions from Asterix have entered common parlance in French, including this one, il est tombé dedans quand il était petit, which means he fell into it when he was little, and is used to refer to anything you form an interest in from a very young age.
Oh my God, that is awesome! That is the greatest thing. Wow. Okay, so Obelix, he delivers these menhirs, as we said, and he is obsessed with eating wild boar. Can eat like 10.
In fact, that's all anyone in the village seems to eat. Wild boar and maybe to a lesser extent fish. That no one wants for unhygienics. Yeah.
The interesting thing about this to me is these gags are like, they're almost not gags after a while. They become a kind of pacing mechanism for Goscinny. Like, how am I going to populate this panel? Have Obelix talk about,
wild boar.
I want to eat a wild boar.
Can I get wild boar here?
Yes, or something like that. To eat, yeah. That's something like that. Just, it actually is there for the tempo of the panels almost. It doesn't matter if it's funny or not at a certain stage. Or maybe, it could be your first Asterix volume. People aren't necessarily reading these in order, but anyway. So now the Romans are like, well, why can't we get this village? So they decide they're going to send a spy into the village. Nobody wants to do it because they always get beat up by this little village of people. Anytime they get near any of those people. So they have to get musical chairs to select someone who's going to be one of the legionaries to be a spy, and they get this guy Caligula Minus.
Little Caligula, and Caligula already means little boots. Right. So it's little boots. There's heaps of Latin wordplay in these volumes, and of course, completely over my head when I was a kid. Now, of course, I find
now I was like looking up stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so they threaten to roast him alive if he doesn't go on the mission. So they disguise him as a Gaul who's been captured.
Yeah.
They do
and they chain him
Chewbacca. Up. Yeah, they chain him up. They sneak him out, and the Romans that are marching him out there are like, okay, we got to put up just minimal resistance. So sure enough, Asterix and Obelix see that a Gaul is being carried, a prisoner, and they hide in the trees, and then they leap down and they beat the crap out of all these guys. Later on, one of Obelix's obsessions becomes collecting the helmets and like stacking them as like his
Asterix
points.
the Gladiator, I think.
Point system. It shows up in more than one volume, but it did definitely, maybe it started in Gladiator.
Yeah. Well, they just love a scrap. Especially Obelix.
Yeah.
But all the Gauls in this village love nothing more than to get in a fight. Yeah. A quality of, one of our main sources for what Gauls were and what they did is Caesar's account of the wars in Gaul.
Right, okay.
The Gallic Wars.
Yeah.
I read it.
Okay.
As prep for this episode. And one thing he mentions is that they are often fighting with one another.
Right.
They're very fractious.
Right. Interesting.
Even within families.
Okay.
He says that's their quality. They're divided, very divided. And they tend to be great fighters as long as they live near Germans or are far away from Roman provinces where they have access to womanizing luxuries.
Huh. But this sounds like the opinion of the conqueror.
Oh, very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so. You can only trust him so far.
Yes.
It's so funny. This, if you'll permit me a small digression.
Sure.
The one I read is the Penguin Classics from, the translation comes from the 1950s. And in the foreword, the author says about Caesar's account of the war, well, this is all true.
Right.
And I also read a more recent translation by a female academic from, I think, from the 90s. And in it, she's much more reluctant to assign historical truth to what Caesar's saying. She says, oh, Caesar's an interesting figure. He kind of lived history and wrote history himself.
Yes. Right. Okay, so the Romans go back to their camp, compendium. They're all beat up. The leader is, the centurion is named Marcus Gynantonicus? Wasn't sure about that one. Anyway, so Caligula Minus, he's got a fake Gaul name at this point, which must be Caligula Minix or something like that. They bring him into the camp, and he's amazed to see everybody super strong. Asterix is hauling a cartload of lumber, just speeding
this
along.
This is early installment weirdness, because normally they're not on the potion all the time. So we see, also people look a little different in this volume. Asterix's style hasn't been quite nailed down yet. Okay. And Obelix is actually thin. A little bit. So he doesn't have his big belly yet. But by the second volume, he's completely got it nailed down, and it's maintained kind of constantly from then on. But yeah, we've got fully automatics, the blacksmith. The
blacksmith, fully automatics. That's a great name for that guy.
In French, he's c'est automatics. It's automatic. I think fully automatics is better.
Sounds like he's the armorer, right?
Even better. His father is called semi-automatics.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, so he's working on steel with his bare hands, he's pounding iron with his.
Which is not something he does in later volumes, but this is an early edition.
Okay, so they sit down to dinner of wild boar. There's a lot of feasting in these comics, by the way. So this spy is like, hey, I need to get home, but I got to get through Roman territory. I'm worried I'm going to get beat up. They're like, we're at peace with the Romans. Why are you worried? He's like, oh no, they'll waylay me or whatever. He says, I need the potion that you guys are on.
Yeah.
Or he says, I need to know the secret. I can't remember, but they go to the druid. They're like, Druid, can you give him some of the potion? He's like, no way, it's like a secret. And he's like, okay, fine, I'll walk home and I'll be killed on the way. And they're like, okay, fine. Caligula Minix is what they call him. And
so it's just his regular Latin name, but with an X instead of an S.
Yes. So this is when they reveal that there's a potion. So the druid mixes the potion and gives him some, and he lifts a big rock, a giant boulder that's nearby, and he's even able to throw it in the air. But it falls on his head, and he's like, oh, you're not invincible. You're not vulnerable. You're just super strong.
Yeah.
So we learned that about the potion. So now he knows what the secret is, but now it's time for square dance. And they have this big, hilarious square dance.
Where you have to pull one another's mustache.
Pull your mustache is one of the lines, one of the moves they're supposed to do.
Yep.
And his fake mustache comes off. One of the plot points is that the Romans are clean shaven.
As they were. Yep. At this stage in history, all Romans are clean shaven. Yep. It's not till a later emperor, Hadrian, that they started growing beards.
Okay.
But, so of course it's but of the Gauls, one thing we know about the Gauls is they're very hairy. They grow beards and mustaches and even pigtails.
Yes, that's right. Obelix has pigtails.
And so, of course, they yank off his mustache. They know he's a Roman. He scarpers back to the camp.
Yeah, because they can't really catch him.
No, because he's on the potion.
Because he's on the potion. But also, Asterix says he doesn't care because he didn't learn much.
Yeah. He doesn't know how to make... He already knows
the potion will wear off.
Yeah, that's right. That's the other thing. The potion only lasts
temporary. As long as the story needs it to.
Yes, exactly.
Most of the time.
Yes. In the film, we get a timeline. We get 10 minutes in the film.
Oh, right.
But that's never in the comics is it defined how long the potion lasts for.
So he gets back to camp and he tells Marcus, hey, it's a magic potion. He's like, where is it? He's like, it's in my belly. He's like, what? Okay, prove it. Beat up these legionaries. The legionaries are like, haha. He beats the crap out of them.
Because he's the smallest and weakest of all.
That's right. That's also why he lost the musical chairs.
Yep.
Anyway, beats them up, and they're like, okay, so what are we going to do? But so he lifts a rock, and they're like, how long does it last? He says, okay, we'll do a test. Marcus says, hold that rock, we'll wait till you can't hold anymore. And then several hours pass by, we're told, and then finally the rock plonks onto the boulder, the giant boulder falls on his head.
We know it's worn off. And then all the people
hilarious moment where all the guys who beat up suddenly pounce on him in one panel to get the revenge.
It's a very Asterix kind of moment. People are always getting their comeuppance.
Yes, there's always flip-flops.
Yeah.
Like there's one in the volume with the Goths, they go in disguise, and the Romans are like, okay, we got to find these Goths, and then they take off their disguises so they're not looking for Gauls, so they just walk at it and it just keeps going back and forth.
Yes.
They do this all the time. Goscinny's very clever about this kind of...
a master of this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just kind of like bureaucratic foibles.
Yes.
His work, I've written down comedy of manners a lot.
Yeah.
Because it's very much about kind of skewering the Romans. They're a pastiche of kind of like the modern world often.
Yeah.
So the Gauls are these idyllic noble savages, and the Romans are essentially the kind of like modernity. They've arrived. They're not especially sinister. I mean, the legionaries are it's never really made out that they're an occupying
No, and they're actually,
army.
as Asterix says in Sir Philem, they're actually at peace.
Yep.
They're just kind of living at a kind of standoff.
And Caesar himself is usually treated with quite a lot of dignity.
Yes, and he often shows up at the end of the volume and lets them go. Because they've done him some service, and he's like, well, I'll let you go this time.
I'll grant you a boon.
Yes.
And they'll often request, I just want to go home. And he'll go, granted, and they'll go home.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how they get out of it, any number of situations.
Yeah.
So often, and a lot of, it's like Asterix the Gladiator and Asterix the Legionary is about Asterix and Obelix interacting with Roman society from either in one perspective as a soldier and in another perspective as a gladiator, and they just do not understand what's going on.
Yeah,
they do, and
there's a lot of bureaucracy. They're trying to become gladiators. Yeah. And the guy that organizes the fights wants to kidnap them and turn them into gladiators, but there's all this kind of comedy of errors where they can't get themselves recruited as much as they try.
They want to get recruited, but every time someone tries to press gang them, they beat them up because they think they're being attacked.
Yes.
And then eventually they find they don't know what a bathhouse is. You know, they go in a bathhouse and they find the guy that's in charge of the gladiators. And he thinks they're there to take revenge for all the men he's been sending after them, trying to capture them. They say, we want to become gladiators now. And he's like, he does like a flop take.
Yeah.
It's just full of stuff like that.
Yeah.
When they're legionaries, they complain about the food, they beat up the cook, and they end up getting roast boar for every meal.
Yes.
They don't understand. They want to get to Egypt quickly because they want to rescue Tragicomics, Panacea's fiance. That's a whole thing.
Yeah.
They both show up in the film. So they, the Centurions are looking forward to breaking them by making them carry rocks. And they carry everybody's rocks because they want to get to Egypt faster. Yes. And it's just completely blowing these poor bureaucrats' minds. Yeah. So it's like we're skewering essentially kind of like elements of modern, because the Romans are a stand-in for modernity almost here. You join the army, you're told what to do, but these Gauls don't understand it. And how ridiculous is that you go to a place to be told what to do when all you really want to do is your own thing. Hence comedy of manners, these irreconcilable class or social differences between these people. Yeah. I read something online that said, so one thing you think when you're reading this, is this very nationalistic because, we've got the French standing against the Gauls standing against the Roman Empire. Now, it is true that in the modern era, Gauls have been identified as kind of like the national forebears of the modern French nation. Because that's just kind of what nation... When the modern nation-building project, you try and push your origins of your nation as far back in history as you can. And the Gauls are kind of like the Gaul that Caesar experienced was broadly kind of like geographically similar to modern France. Yeah. So even though the word France comes from the Franks were kind of Germans, much like the Saxons in Britain, who migrated into France and formed up. But the Franks are out of fashion ever since the French Revolution because they represented the nobility of their old regime. Right. So now you need a new kind of like national... Okay. So the Gauls are it. Okay. Bang. All right. So the Gauls are resisting Rome. But what's Rome in this context? I did read something online that said that Rome here might be a stand-in for America.
Interesting.
So when these are being written, like in the 60s, France, this post-war period, France is undergoing kind of like a rapid modernization, like we talked about in Distant Neighborhood episode. This period's called like the Golden Years. Everything's booming, but France is becoming very modern very quickly. And modernity shares a lot of qualities with kind of like American global capitalism. So there's some anxiety maybe among French people is how do we hold on to our Frenchness when everything's becoming modern in a form that seems associated with kind of like global norms that America seems to dominate. So maybe this is addressing some of those anxieties, or maybe it's
the scale is kind of similar of France versus America, maybe.
Sure, yeah.
Like in terms of like population or yeah, I can see that. Yeah. Okay, so meanwhile, back in the village, the druid is going to the. I think at the stage he's
going to the
conference.
Well, this is in Asterix and the Goths. So we've moved on.
Sure. Okay.
Essentially, everything winds up in that original story. He goes back to the camp. Immediately, the Roman centurion in charge of the camp starts plotting. He wants to be the next Caesar. They always want to be the next Caesar.
Getafix is captured.
This is in the Asterix and the Goths, isn't it?
No, it's in the first one.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely, it's in the first one. Yeah, so he's gonna go get some mistletoe from the forest.
Oh, he's always harvesting mistletoe with his sickle.
So
he's always scratching his thumb.
Yes. So while he's there, he's captured by the Romans and brought back, and they're like, "Okay, you're gonna mix." They torture him. They're like, "You're gonna mix this potion for us."
Yeah. Is it this one where he makes the hair tonic?
Yes.
Right.
So Asterix and Obelix, or at least just Asterix, goes into the Roman settlement to rescue the druid. He sneaks in in an ox cart in the hay.
Yeah. With an ox salesman and there's a bit where Asterix convinces him to sell his carts instead of his oxes.
Yes.
So silly.
Yes. So Asterix is captured. He lets himself be captured. They try to torture the information out of him, but him and Getafix don't really care. They're going to scheme their way out of this.
Getafix seems impervious to harm somehow, or maybe he just doesn't care.
Yeah, or maybe it's partly the potion. I don't know what it was.
Well, the potion doesn't make you invulnerable.
That's right. Yeah, it's a little bit.
Getafix just doesn't care.
Yeah.
And in fact, he doesn't care in the movie either. He's just untorturable.
Yes.
He's too old and doesn't give a shit.
Yes. So finally, he's like, "Okay, I'll give you the potion." He's got a plan.
Yeah.
There's a great scene here where he mixes the potion, and they're like, "Okay, Marcus, do you want to try it?" And he's like, "Wait, you might have poisoned it." So he wants a legionary to volunteer. The legionaries won't volunteer.
Yeah.
So they're like, "Okay, we'll get that ox cart guy because he's a civilian."
The stupid guy.
They force it on him. He takes the potion and is like, "Okay, who wants to fight this guy?" And they're like, "We don't want to fight him." And Asterix is like, "Okay, let him punch me."
This is pages and pages of stuff, and it's funny.
He punches Asterix. Asterix falls over as if he's just... He says, "It's like the sky fell on me." Of course, he's just making this up. So they think they have a working potion because they tested it on two people that were not... no Romans have been tested. So, but it actually turns out to be this hair growth tonic.
Yeah, and they're all just growing hair like mad.
Yep. They want the antidote.
There is no antidote. Because it just wears off in a couple of hours.
Yeah.
But the Romans don't know that.
There's a hilarious bit, too, where they think they've drunk a strength potion, and Marcus goes around trying to lift things like a tree and a giant boulder. Finally, he lifts this little stone.
Yeah.
Maybe perhaps this one, he says, "I've done it, I'm the Superman." And so he thinks he's got super strength.
He doesn't notice, because he's lifted progressively smaller and smaller rocks.
Yes.
He hasn't noticed that it's gotten so small that a regular guy can lift it. He just concludes that, maybe that one was too big for the potion. And it's just... Goscinny is just kind of like a real master of this kind of thing.
Yes.
A real master of this medium.
Yes. And all this kind of back and forth stuff. And now they convinced to make another potion because we found out that first one was... so they think it's the antidote.
Yeah.
But I think he just make like a soup or something like that doesn't have any effect.
Yeah.
And they run away, but Caesar has shown up. But now Asterix reveals to Caesar that Marcus was planning to use his super strength to take over the empire.
Yeah. There's a funny line where Marcus confides in his second in command that the two of them will form a triumvirate in Rome.
Yes. But then each of them is also planning to kill the other.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
And it'll be a triumvirate of one. Great.
Something that would have gone way over my head as a kid.
Yeah, absolutely.
But now, of course, I find very funny.
So for revealing this betrayal, Caesar grants Asterix and Obelix a prize, which is they just want to...
They just want to go home. That's all they ever want.
Yep.
And so that happens.
Yep.
They go back and have a feast. The final panel is always a feast.
It's always a feast, much like the Fast and Furious movies. It's always a barbecue at the end.
Yeah, we've got a big circular table.
Yeah.
And everyone's eating a wild boar, and the bard Cacophonix is usually
tied up, so he can't sing, and gagged, so he can't sing during the feast.
Yes.
Yes, his singing is terrible. Everybody really hates it, but he's really proud of it and thinks they're all ignorant of his fine music.
Yeah, so, and the remaining 3 volumes we read all basically follow this same theme.
Yeah.
The Romans will capture or take or cause to have something that the Gauls from the village want back. Asterix and Obelix will go out. They'll encounter all manner of Roman foibles. Asterix will usually outfox them with some kind of plot. Caesar will appear at the end.
Right.
And grant them a boon, which will usually be for them to press the reset button and go home to their village.
I saw on Wikipedia, it said that usually the volumes alternated, where one would be set in the village and one would be set in a different country or different region or something.
The ones we read were
except for
the Soothsayer
Colosseum one.
Well, we read 2 where they went... 3 really where they went abroad, because we read the Asterix and the Goths, Asterix the Gladiator, and Asterix the Legionary. Yeah. In those 3... they go and experience kind of other countries. They go to Germany, and they experience Germany, where everyone wants to fight, just like the Gauls, and they end up... There's some hilarious translation gags.
Yes.
That's another thing. There's a lot of jokes about translations.
Yes, yeah. Because they often, when they curse, they're just like random symbols.
Yeah. And the Goths will always speak in Gothic font.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
A good joke.
Yeah.
And then we did read one, Asterix and the Soothsayer, which is set in the village.
Yes.
And the camps. That one is really funny. A soothsayer comes to the village, and in this world of magic potions and druids, Asterix immediately knows that there's no such thing as a soothsayer.
Yes. Yes, that was interesting, and it was interesting to me because
That's because Asterix is infallible.
I didn't question it too much. For some reason, I was like,
well, Asterix is infallible. Potion? And druids are real, but soothsayers aren't.
Yeah.
Fine. But this soothsayer really is a confidence man. He just predicts things that are going to happen anyway. He says when the storm clears, there will be nice weather.
There will be nice weather. Yeah,
and there's going to be a fight soon. But of course, there's always going to be a fight.
And he's like, "What do you need to read the future?" And he's like, "Well, I'll need some beer and like kind of soup, a bowl of soup."
Yeah, yeah. And the credulous villagers all, but. What makes this volume so funny is the soothsayer ends up in the Roman camp, and the Romans believe he is a real soothsayer because they have orders to arrest soothsayers.
Yes.
And now the soothsayer wants desperately to prove that he's not a soothsayer. Yeah. But the more he tries to prove he isn't one, the more these coincidences occur that make him look like he is a soothsayer.
Or not, because one of the guys wants to arrest him or one doesn't or something like that, and it's always... They're always reading it. It always works out in a way that it's the other one. I can't even really describe it. You have to read it.
It's very clever. And at one point, for example, I think he predicts a die roll. He says it'll be a
7.
A 7. And then sure enough, it is a 7. And they're like, that's proof. And then later on, when he's convinced the centurion of the camp has announced that he's not a soothsayer, so he doesn't have to be arrested. But the centurion believes he is a soothsayer.
Right. That's right.
Because he has told the centurion that he's going to be Caesar.
Yeah.
So he believes he is one, and he believes he's going to make him Caesar.
Yeah.
Yet he's told everyone else in the camp that he's not.
That's
so
right.
They won't arrest him and send him away. Then the soothsayer leaves the centurion's tent, runs by the same Roman legionary who earlier rolled the dice and predicted where the soothsayer predicted the correct dice roll. Now he wants him to do it again. This is at a point where the centurion has told everyone in the camp that he's not a soothsayer.
Yeah.
But the legionary threatens him with death and makes him roll it anyway.
Yes.
He says 7 again.
Yeah.
The centurion rolls the dice, and it comes up, I think, 5 and 2, or 6 and 1.
Okay.
No.
I thought
it only makes sense in Roman numerals. It's 2 Roman numerals that don't add up to 7.
Right.
Yet, if you position them differently, it would be 7.
Okay, yeah.
And so then the legionary says, I guess you're not a soothsayer. And the centurion walks past and says, don't make it so obvious! Because there's 2 ways of reading this dice.
Right, okay.
Another joke that went over my head as a kid. But this
was funny reading this week.
Reading it as an adult, I was like, oh, that's it.
Right.
Anyway, I can't imagine how Goscinny kind of plotted this out.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just like a really gifted kind of writer to keep ratcheting up the foibles.
Yes.
Page after page.
Yeah.
Oh, it's great.
Okay, so I think we can kind of... So this movie is kind of a hodgepodge of bits and pieces from different Asterix volumes, but maybe we'll talk about those a little bit as we get on them, as we get through it. Okay, so Asterix and Obelix versus Caesar from 1999. Christian Clavier as Asterix, don't know him.
Mm-hmm. Gérard Depardieu
as Obelix.
We do know him. As far as I can tell, has never appeared in another comic book movie.
Right.
So he won't be back, despite having a long career in both French and English language cinema.
Yeah.
This is the only comics property in which he appears.
I did do an IMDb advanced search for any crossover of actors from this and the other French movies we've done so far, and there weren't any.
No.
None so far.
There weren't. There's only ones that may occur in the future.
Yes, that's right.
Did you?
Oh, I don't know.
The only one that I spotted, but I only did a desultory check. I didn't do a proper search. Is the guy that plays Prolix, the soothsayer. Yeah. Incidentally, Prolix has the same meaning in English and as French, so that's one that they didn't have to translate. It means to be boringly verbose or detailed. Daniel Prevost is the actor's name. He will be in the Lucky Luke movie.
Oh, okay. All right.
Remember that name.
All right. Okay, and we've also got Roberto Benigni in this as Detritus.
Yes.
He's like a high-ranking Roman.
Well, this was a French-German-Italian co-production.
Yes.
And it seems, as a condition of financing, some of the roles had to be reserved for German and Italian actors.
Right.
Mostly Germans, but we do have Benigni as Detritus, kind of the main antagonist.
Yes.
I know Benigni as the guy that did Life is Beautiful.
Yep.
And also starring in a very quixotic adaptation of Pinocchio from 2002.
Yes.
Where a middle-aged man plays Pinocchio the boy.
Yes. He was also in Son of Pink Panther, which is apparently a huge failure. I haven't seen it. I'm trying to think of the movie with the taxi. I'm going to have to cut through this, but Night on Earth. Night on Earth is a anthology movie directed by Jim Jarmusch. And he's in one segment of that, and it's one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life.
Well, he's certainly a good comic actor. He's great in this.
He's great, and I have to say, I didn't know about the multicultural casting or the multinational casting, but the faces of these people are amazing. I don't know if this Caesar is wearing a fake nose or that's his real nose.
He's very definitely wearing a fake nose.
Okay, but there's this one, the head legionary, this guy's face and body shape, he came straight out of a comic book. Yeah. All these actors came straight out of a comic book. Even
some amazing character actors.
Beautiful Panacea and Tragicomics is this absolute hunk. Yeah, that's like,
German
where
actor.
did he find these? They look just like they came out of the Asterix comics. They look like these impossible drawings.
The guy that plays Tragicomics, he's just. Yeah, as you said, he's just he's just a German actor. He barely has any lines in the movie.
I think he's in a couple of shots in the movie, really.
Yeah, but he looks just like the guy from the comic.
He's like this blonde Adonis type.
They've just got these great a lot of great French, German, Italian character actors with extraordinary features and cast them in this comic book movie.
They look like Uderzo drawings. Really.
I didn't love this movie, but I will say that the casting is pretty good.
Yes.
With the possible exception of Depardieu. But we'll get into that.
Yeah, so we start with the Roman legions. They want to cross the channel and take over England.
Kumar, I'm shocked that you've skipped over the credits.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Where we have our recognition of the Goscinny and Uderzo.
Yeah.
We've got based on character in French, d'après les personnages.
Yes.
Based on characters by Goscinny and Uderzo.
But a weird credit concerning they've also taken plot points, or huge plot elements or storyline narrative.
It's such a farrago of plot points that I don't know if you could even.
Yeah. But why not just say just based on Asterix comics by bande dessinée by Goscinny and Uderzo? Why go to the trouble of pointing out it's specific just based on the characters?
I imagine it's just boilerplate.
Yeah,
you could either say based on comics or you could say based on characters.
Yeah. Okay. So the Romans want to invade England, but then they're like, actually, there's still one little village that we haven't conquered here.
Yep. So, Caesar is addressing the troops.
Yes.
Caesar is played by a German actor called Gottfried John.
Okay.
It is a fake nose.
Okay.
I recognised him, but didn't know what he was from. He was in GoldenEye.
Oh, yes, of course.
The Russian general in Goldeneye.
Of course.
Yes. Sans fake nose.
Yes.
He doesn't speak French, so all his lines were dubbed over.
Okay.
He plays Caesar, I felt, very pristily, but, oh well. I mean, he's trying to pose like he is in the comic.
Well, you know what? It almost doesn't matter because we've got 4 other Caesars to look at in the next 4 movies.
We'll be able to vote
pick
who
and
was
choose
the
which
best
one we
Caesar.
like.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so basically, Benigni here, who's playing Detritus, is like, well, we haven't finished conquering Gaul because there still is one village. Now, at the setup, we learn from the legionary whose name I can't remember, the big blocky one. They already know that they use a magic potion.
Yeah.
In this village. He's like, well, the village...
Saves time there.
Yeah, exactly, because even after the first volume of the comic, we know about the potion.
Yeah.
He's like, well, they have this secret magic potion, and it makes them super strong, and we can't beat them. Now, cut to the village. The chief is riding around on a shield.
Yep.
As he does in the comic. Cacophonix is there.
Yep.
We meet all the familiar faces. The fishmonger. There's a big fight over whether
That's the point of this scene. I mean, a lot of this film is, remember this from the comics? So very much this scene, they've built a beautiful set, I must say.
Yes, this is what I was about to get to, and I'm jumping way ahead, but I think they're trying to, in this movie, unlike most of the movies we watch, we've watched over 100 movies, where it's like, how can we make this comic in the real world? This movie is like, how can we get the audience into the comic book?
That's fair.
And they have built this comic book looking, it's almost, this is what Little Abner wanted to be. They built a very...
I'm impressed that you made that... I was thinking that.
Comic booky kind of world, and they're trying to put you into it. Yeah. And they have the special effects and kooky sound effects and stuff like that to make everything very... You're in there. They're not trying to make this a realistic Batman Begins version of Asterix, right?
Sure. Yeah, this is very much trying to reproduce as much as possible of the comic aesthetic.
Yes.
This is all indoors.
Yeah.
This particular set. They've made... It's on a soundstage.
Yeah.
So we've got the Cacophonix's tree. That's obviously not a real tree. They carved a tree out of polystyrene, put it on a metal frame, hand attached all the leaves on it. Right. Apparently took like a month.
Yeah.
And covered in latex bark, hand painted.
Wow. Okay, so Caius Bonus was the name of that legionary.
Yes. So Christmas Bonus in the comic, Gaius Bonus in...
Yes.
I don't know why that's funny in French. Probably it isn't.
Yeah, I don't know. But Caius is like, okay, he tells...
He's spectacularly ugly and has a really gravelly voice.
Yes, and he has this weird, stocky frame. Yes. He looks really great.
And it's even better because they put a Roman-style helmet on him.
Yeah.
That has the effect... It's the one where there's a spike that goes straight up, or a pole that goes straight up, and then it branches out into a semicircular comb.
Yeah.
And it has the effect of making his head even more pronounced away from his body. It makes him look absurd.
Yeah.
It makes his body look even more square.
Yes.
Because you can't see his hair. He just looks so crazy. He looks like a comic character. Yeah. Great casting. He's trying to tell Detritus that you can't get these Gauls, they are invincible. And Detritus is like, nonsense, I have my engineer. Yeah. Engineer is called Hypotenuse.
Yes. Yes.
He's going to build a death trap that will take care of the Gauls.
Yeah. Right, so they set this trap in the forest, and when Asterix and Obelix are walking along, they set off the trap. By the way, again, the Romans, they fall into this kind of pit, and the rock is on top of them. Yeah. And they're like,
well, the idea is that the rock squishes them down into the ground.
Yeah.
And they're now pinned beneath it in a kind of like a pit that they've dug as they've been pressed down by it. It doesn't really make sense, but it needs to happen so that they can live.
Yeah, but did they want them dead, or did they want to capture them?
They wanted them dead. They're supposed to be dead.
But that's only 2 of the villagers. It doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't. Lots of things in this film don't make sense.
Okay. By the way, the Roman party, again, looks amazing. Did you notice this Yul Brynner-looking guy, this bald guy that was hanging around with them? Just looks incredible, like stepped straight out of a comic book.
I do love with the costumes in this, they're very colourful. I love a colourful costume. Yeah. As I've said before, it's a personal bugbear of mine on this podcast, this attempt to make the past look drab. Everyone's very colourful. Their armour is polished, like it would have been.
Yeah.
And it just, it just looks like it came straight out of the pages of something Uderzo drew.
Yep.
That part I'm happy with. All right, so they're imprisoned under the rock. Okay. They're imprisoned under the rock. And they need to push their way out. Obelix is not strong enough to push his way out by himself because he has no leverage. So Asterix needs to drink some potion, which he does. We get an effect in the...
Yes! Now, I don't think there's ever an effect in the comic when he drinks a potion. He just drinks it. He's got super strength. There's no buggy eyes or flashing lights. Oh,
you get a halo.
Little halo, yeah.
Like, that he's full of energy or something.
Yeah.
So how do we do this in the film? Late 90s CGI, they decide the best way to do that is to kind of...
It's like a kind of fire, like flames coming out of his head. A little bit like...
They sort of just do some distortion. They make his face change color. It goes green, it goes blue.
Yeah, that too, yeah.
There's some warping.
Yes.
The eyes pop out.
Yeah.
And fine.
Yeah.
I guess it doesn't look great.
I don't know if I think it looks fine. I was actually surprised at the quality of effects in this non-Hollywood production.
Really? I was, okay, that's fair, I suppose.
I don't know if any other, it was hard, other countries were not.
Look, that's
I guess,
fair.
when did we get Crouching Tiger? Is that 2000?
2000, the next year, I think.
Okay.
2000. Or maybe 2001 or 2002. The thing is, yeah, I mean, that's fair. Completely fair. I was very underwhelmed by the quality of the CGI, but as you point out, this is not a Hollywood production. I just couldn't help but thinking 1999 is the year The Matrix came out.
Yes. But that was considered top of the line even for Hollywood productions. If you look at Hollywood CGI around that period...
Well, The Phantom Menace came out that year too.
Yeah, well, those are the two most expensive...
Well, they weren't that expensive.
Those were CGI productions.
Yeah,
you don't think Phantom Menace was an expensive movie?
The Phantom Menace was very expensive, okay? About 3 times the budget of this movie. But The Matrix was only about 60 million.
Okay.
And this film was about 45 million US. Okay. But a lot of that went on the set.
I would say this, you can see all the money on screen in this movie.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
Like, all the costumes. By the way, it's not just like the effect of him. Like, we get these, like, Lord of the Rings type shots of the entire Roman army, which must have been done with early CG. We didn't see that a lot before Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings came out the next year. Oh, God, there's no comparison between Lord of the Rings. But then Lord of the Rings cost hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, they got a lot. The shots in the foreground is people. So they've got a lot of extras.
Yeah.
And then, as you say, we've got shots in the background, on the hills in the background. They've inserted with the computer the rest of Caesar's legions.
But, I mean, the people in the foreground all have these costumes, like these wonderful, colorful costumes.
I think that's very fair to say the money, we see it all.
Yeah.
Yeah, perhaps that was a bit harsh on it.
Well, you've got time to think about it because we're not at the end yet. So back at the village, we have the panacea. She's called Falbala.
Falbala. It's French. It means it's not particularly. I mean, panacea is not particularly clever. That's obviously a Greek word that means cure all.
Right.
Falbala is French. It means skirt ruffle.
Okay.
So her character in the comic has a very distinctive ruffle at the bottom of her skirt that bells out around her feet.
Yeah.
In the film, she doesn't have that. Instead, what she does have is an enormous chest.
Yes. Yes. So this is a plot line that comes up in...
Asterix the Legionary.
It's the one where... Because they need to... Her boyfriend, her fiancé...
Tragicomics.
Has been
played by the hunky
pressed into... In the comic, he's been captured by the Romans. They need to go to Rome and rescue him.
He's been drafted. He's gone to Egypt to fight in the Roman Civil Wars.
So they need to... Asterix and Obelix agree... Obelix has a crush on her. She's come back to the village. She's been away for a while. She comes back. She's all grown up. She's filled out. He's like, ooh la la.
Yeah, Obelix is completely infatuated.
Yes, with her, but she immediately, she's like, well, my fiance's been captured. Yeah. They go off to rescue him. So that's where this plot element comes from. She comes back to the village in the movie. She's been away for a while. She's grown up. Obelix becomes infatuated with her.
Speaking of having a crush on Panacea.
Yeah.
I think in the Archie week you mentioned that you were fond of, was it Veronica or was it Becky?
Betty? I don't remember which one. I think I had a pretty significant crush on Panacea as a child. Yeah. Yeah, she's drawn like this kind of doll, and they're like Barbie and Ken dolls almost.
Yeah.
Yeah. They don't look like anybody else in the village.
No, everyone else looks like Bigfoot, as you said.
Yes.
But they look like they're drawn very nicely.
Yes. Back at the camp, the treasurer, the tax collector, shows up. The Roman the camp. I meant the Roman settlement.
Yeah.
The tax collector shows up.
Yeah.
And he's going from place to place, and they're these kind of like almost slaves, or like.
Yep.
They get paid a little bit. These guys are.
Well, they get paid in food, it seems, or maybe
they get thrown some coins, I think, or something.
Well, they get paid food, but later on, one of the Romans says that they're not being paid overtime.
Right.
Who knows? It doesn't matter. They're drones.
They're digging a trench.
Yeah.
And they see the cart, the treasury cart, go into the settlement. One coin falls out. One of the guys manages to secret it away. Prolix. Yeah, he becomes Prolix. I was a bit confused about this when the first time I was watching. I was like, okay. But anyway, they're like, okay. He comes up with the scheme. So they show up, these three trench diggers show up at the Gaul village, Asterix's village, pretending to be a soothsayer, which is similar to the soothsayer plot.
Yeah.
They asked, he says he doesn't read entrails, he reads soup. Please give us some soup.
Well, they ask him, what does he need to he says hot soup and warm beer. Yeah, is what he needs to read the future. Which is a good line. And Asterix again is skeptical.
Yes.
And in what I think is a funny line, Vital Statistics says, "Asterix, don't be so superstitious."
Yes.
He's superstitious because he doesn't believe in soothsayers.
That's right.
Which I like.
That's right. Yes. That is good. But this soothsayer says, a big chest of money is going to come to the village because he knows a tax collector is going to come around. This is part of a very elaborate, weird plot by Prolix, the trench digger, to steal this money because they can't steal it from the Romans. He's going to try to steal it from the Gauls, but it's very convoluted how
really
this plot works.
He's convinced, he tells Vital Statistics that he's going to come into a lot of money, and when he comes into a lot of money, he will then use that money to hire an army to throw the Romans out of Gaul, which incidentally is not something Vital Statistics was ever interested in the comics.
Yeah.
But here it's important. Vital Statistics, he really wants to be he wants to be the next Vercingetorix. Vercingetorix, a real figure from history, mentioned in the Conquest of Gaul by Caesar. He was the leader of the sort of what we would call, I guess, national rebellion against Rome, eventually taken in chains to Rome, where he lived a kind of miserable life. Anyway, but a heroic kind of national figure in the modern era for French people. So Vital Statistics wants to be the next Vercingetorix, and he's totally caught up in this, and he decides that they're going to capture the treasure, and he's going to use it to fund this rebellion.
And Asterix is against this.
Yes.
He's the only one that votes nay on this.
Because they do hold a vote. And Asterix knows, because he's the only sane person, he knows that if you steal Caesar's treasury, Caesar will show up.
Yeah.
And like in the comics, Caesar is a force that you can't resist.
Yeah.
Because he'll bring all his legions. There's only so much. The potion's fine against 4 encampments with the kind of like the scum of the earth. Yeah. But if Caesar comes with his legions, you can't resist them. Yeah. Especially because the potion only lasts for 10 minutes. But he's outvoted.
Yes. And the tax collector shows up. This guy also has a great face. He also looks like he came from a comic book.
Yeah, he's astonishingly sleazy.
Yeah. But they steal the
treasure,
treasure from the tax collector. They kick him out. He goes back. Asterix wants to return the treasure. He's like, we can't keep this or Caesar's going to attack. And
he wants to give it back,
Yeah.
No one wants to give it back. He tries to take it out of the village. He drinks some potion. He tries to take it out. They stop him.
Yeah. And meanwhile, then the Romans show up because they want their money back, so they are attacking. But the villagers drink their potions and they attack these Romans. And we get very comic booky, like, people are like boinging around. They're flying through the air.
Perfect,
And there's a lot of Roman attacking in this. I think it's kind of like, but I felt like it's like a 2-hour movie. The Romans attack the village, I'm going to say like 3 times, maybe.
At least.
I think it would be satisfying if you were Asterix fan that was like the Romans attack. There's fights. I'm not sure, but we'll talk about that closer to the end.
Sure. Now the soothsayer.
So they beat the Romans. The Romans are driven back.
And now they have a feast.
There's a lot of feasts in this movie as well. There's 3 or 4 feasts.
In that sense, it's accurate to the comic because there's always feast. Now they're having a feast. Everyone's always hassling the soothsayer to tell their fortune. Fine, this is consistent with the comic. But the soothsayer is always complaining because Asterix is causing bad vibes because he doesn't believe in the soothsayer. So then Vital Statistics says, I order you to make up. And the soothsayer has identified Asterix as the impediment to his plot, which is to steal the treasure, I imagine, which he could have already done at this point. So now the soothsayer says they have to eat the omelette of friendship, which he prepares with apparently hallucinogenic mushrooms, but then he
hypnotizes him with hypno ray.
Not just regular hypnosis.
Yeah, it's like a rays that come out of his eyes.
Out of his pupils into Asterix's pupils. Watching this, I'm like, hang on. This soothsayer was a trench digger.
Yeah.
He was a fake in the comic. He's supposed to be a fake in the movie. Now he's got magic powers.
I think, you know what? I think this is an effect that's not supposed to be in there. I think he's just supposed to convince. So what's happening is Obelix has been doing impressions of Caesar all night. So Prolix hypnotizes Asterix, you hate Caesar.
Yeah.
So that Asterix will attack Obelix.
Yeah.
Will believe that Obelix is Caesar and attack him, and that will distract them enough to escape with the money. Now, my thing is, he didn't need to hypnotize him. Nope. He could have just said, hey, you hate Caesar. Like, got him high on the mushrooms and just convince him. Take out the special effect with the eye beams and it makes more sense.
Also, what? Here's my Why does he even need to, I suppose, Asterix...
Miles was how did he know that Obelix was going to be doing Caesar impressions?
Well, we heard he'd been doing it all night.
Yes, but what was the plan when they came to the village in the first place to steal the money? Yeah. It was like, okay, we'll convince them to keep the money, and then we'll convince Obelix to do Caesar impressions, which they don't do.
No.
So I don't know where this plot came from anyway.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Look, if I were playing devil's advocate, I would say the trench digger, Prolix figures it's easier to fool Gauls than it is to fool Romans. And that certainly is proven to be true.
That's fine. It's easier to steal from the Gauls than Romans. That's all fine. But how did they know that Obelix was going to be doing Caesar impressions?
They didn't know. How did they... If you poison someone with hallucinogenic mushrooms, how do you know they're going to do exactly what you tell them to do?
Well,
how do you know he doesn't just try to...
You can make that comic booky. That is... I'm like, okay, I'll accept that it's a magic mushroom that's almost literally magic.
The film was pretty plainly... as you said, there's a special effect that doesn't belong. Prolix shoots lasers out of his eyes into Asterix's eyes.
Yes. Yeah.
If this guy is a wizard, why is he grubbing around in a trench? Why didn't he just hypnotize the Romans to let him have... he has to get them to eat the mushrooms, I suppose. But, I can't help but compare this unfavorably to the comic, where there's always some clever gambit or pile of gambits.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where someone always has egg on their... Someone always has egg on their face.
Yes.
They've plotted one thing and it's gone another way. And it's piled up over pages and pages and pages. And here, instead, what we get is laser eye beams and a plot from nowhere that makes no sense.
Yeah.
And it's not the last time it happens in the film, as we'll come to.
Yeah. So, Prolix gets away with the treasure.
And gets no comeuppance.
And I don't think we ever see that treasure again. I think that's it for that plot line.
In the comic, people always end up getting their comeuppance. It's always tied up nicely.
Yes.
Here, Prolix just escapes with the treasure.
Yeah, and then suddenly...
Attacks the entirety of Gaul.
And then it's Druid conference time.
Yep.
That
plot just ends.
That plot just ends. Suddenly a new plot comes in. They're not really connected in any way.
That's it.
So Getafix is going to his Druid conference, which he does in one of the comics.
Yes, it's to the Carnutes, which was a real mentioned in Caesar's commentaries. He mentions the Druids. He spends quite a bit of time on the Druids, actually, when describing Gaul. He says, that they're the chief priesthood of the Gauls. The Gauls apparently were very religious.
Okay.
Very into sacrifice, especially human sacrifice. If someone got sick, according to Caesar, they would sacrifice a person in order to recover. They preferred to sacrifice criminals, but if criminals weren't available, they'd just make do with anybody. And the Druids were kind of in charge of that. The worst punishment, and the Druids kind of were magistrates. They would rule on, if there was a dispute among people, the Druids would be the one to resolve it.
Right.
Getafix never does anything like that. He just hangs out in his hovel and makes potion. But Caesar mentions that they would go to an annual conference in this forest or land called the Carnutes, which was, they believed to be at the center of the country. Or the center of the world, perhaps. And it is roughly, the modern kind of geographically, it is roughly in the center of France.
Okay.
Yeah. So I imagine this is straight out of Bella Gallica.
Yeah, right. Interesting.
Well, these comics are not very historical, I think, but they are...
Well, if the Carnoots is where you say it is, that's very far from where we see...
it's far from Brisbane.
The village is at the tip
they have to go a long way.
of the channel.
I would say these comics, they're playing a lot with what we know about antiquity as opposed to what we know about history.
Yeah.
So French people in the 1960s when these first came out, the generation of French people would have grown up reading the classics.
Yeah.
And would have studied Latin in school.
Right.
So they probably read The Conquest of Gaul.
Right.
As Latin students as kids.
Okay.
They would be... French dictionaries used to be published with a little, fold out with Latin phrases in them.
Yeah.
Which constantly pop up. Another one that appears in more than one volume is Alia e acta est, the die is cast, which is what Caesar said when he crossed the Rubicon, of course. So, people reading this, and indeed, people... like you and I reading this will recognise kind of these phrases and these stories.
Right.
I mean, the classics are still with us in a very real sense.
Right.
But as far as history is concerned, I mean, what we know about the Gauls, mostly archaeological evidence, they didn't just eat wild boar all the time. They were crop growers.
Right.
Right.
So at the Druid conference, Detritus is there in disguise. He's disguised as a Druid.
Yeah.
He has a taste of the potion, which makes him super strong. He's able to lift a giant boulder over his head. And he kidnaps Getafix.
Yes.
And now we have a plot that's a little bit similar to the first volume where he...
Asterix and it's similar to the first volume and similar to Asterix the Gladiator, where Getafix is taken to Rome. Is it Getafix that's taken to Rome? No, it's the Bard that's taken to Rome. Cacophonix is taken to Rome.
Yes.
So, we've amalgamated the two stories.
Yes. So now, in order to rescue him, Asterix and Obelix disguise themselves as Romans, which is in that volume, to get in. And there's a whole thing where Asterix gives Obelix a code word. He says, stay in disguise until I give you this phrase, until I say the specific phrase.
It's so Obelix changes his name to Obelus, much like Caligula Minus changed his name to Caligula Minux. In reverse, he's now Obelus. And the code phrase is, Obelus by tutatis, become Obelix again.
Yes.
So if Obelix hears that, then he'll become I suppose, the carnage machine that he is most of the time.
Otherwise, he has to maintain cover. He has to keep his cover the whole time.
This is what passes for stakes, I guess, in the film. I'm not super impressed with the plotting in this movie. So what in the comics would be some hilarious... some plot by Asterix or some funny way that the naivety of the Gauls clashes with the systems and bureaucracies of the Roman Empire. Instead, we have essentially Asterix at the mercy of the Romans, constantly trying to get Obelix to hear him say the code phrase.
Yes.
And that's the stakes.
Yeah, and it's pretty early on because they pretend they come into the camp. Asterix pretends to be a prisoner.
Yeah.
And he's taken away. He's the Druid's assistant, they say. He's Getafix's assistant. So he's taken away. So Getafix isn't giving up the information.
No, he's untorturable.
So they tie Asterix to the block. They torture him.
Again,
Getafix still won't give the information.
He says any Gaul would rather die than betray whatever.
Yeah, then they catch Dogmatix and tie him. There's a crazy scene where they've got this dog on the rack and
they're stretching him out.
Yeah, and then
Getafix breaks.
Instantly. That's it.
Because he can't bear cruelty to animals, where he's perfectly happy for Asterix and Asterix is yelling out for Obelix all this time, but Obelix is so stupid.
Yes.
That he just keeps pretending to be a legionary?
Yes, because that was the agreement. He had trouble remembering the phrase. This was in one of the comics, too, where he can't remember or he goes in and he swears to the wrong god, and it blows his cover. Something like that happened. So he's got it. He's too thick. This is established when he's trying to remember the code word. This is the safest way. Just don't switch back until you hear the phrase. Yeah. So, meanwhile, Detritus gets a hold of this giant Gaul in disguise, Obelix, and he's like, hey, you help me.
Obelix is looking for Asterix.
Yes.
So I suppose he hasn't completely gone native. And I think some people come to try to stop him or come to arrest him.
They try to arrest Detritus for some reason.
Oh, right. And they just happen to blunder into Obelix.
Yes.
And Obelix asks... So Detritus has been revealed as scheming against Caesar.
Yes.
because he wants the potion so he can, like all of these characters in this, he wants to replace Caesar. Caesar has actually overheard him.
Yes.
And has said, well, you're arrested and you're going to be thrown to the lions. Everyone's going to be thrown to the lions. It's a refrain in this. Everyone's always going to be thrown to the lions. Detritus runs, and as he's running, being pursued by centurions or legionaries, he bumps into Obelix. All Obelix wants is to find out where Asterix is. And of course, the legionaries tell him to shove off and give him like a punch or a push. And as soon as they do that, of course, he flattens them. Then Detritus goes like, "Oh wow, okay, you're on my team now. You're my guy. I'll show you where your friend is being held prisoner, but you just have to stick with me for now, and we're going to go arrest Caesar." And they do.
Yeah.
Caesar's put in jail.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, Detritus goes back to torturing Gottfried and Asterix.
Yeah.
Or rather, Gottfried is already broken. So now he says he's asked for the ingredients.
Yeah.
He makes the potion. And I kept waiting, watching this scene. I kept waiting. Is it going to be the hair tonic?
Yeah.
Is it going to be a fake potion?
No, it's the real potion.
Gottfried always has a plan, and Asterix always has a plan. They're very canny.
Yeah.
No, he just makes the real potion. He asks for Asterix to be brought to him. Detritus brings him in a cage with a gag around his mouth so he can't drink the potion. So then Gottfried says, I need to chant a magic phrase. So Asterix needs to be ungagged. And I think, really? That's the plan? You're just going to feed him some magic potion in the cage?
Yeah.
No, and then that doesn't even work.
It doesn't work. Yeah.
So, very disappointing.
Yeah.
I guess if you're a dumb screenwriter, you can't write a good plan. So instead, Gottfried is an idiot now who thinks that he would be able to feed Asterix boiling hot potion while surrounded by armed guards, and of course that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Now Detritus has the potion.
He has the potion. He becomes super strong.
Yeah.
So he's going to take over the empire according to his plan.
But he already is in charge because he's imprisoned Caesar.
Yes.
So the potion doesn't actually help him in any way.
Yeah. No.
And in fact, he never drinks it.
Yeah.
Instead, he holds a big circus. Oh, there's a great scene. He's proclaimed emperor by the troops.
Yeah.
This is straight out of Roman history. If you were some guy, a general in the field, and you decided you could do a better job than the guy back in Rome, the first thing you did was get yourself proclaimed emperor by the troops.
Okay.
You appeared before them, and they were coached to proclaim you Caesar.
Okay. And
then you gave them a bonus. And that's exactly what Detritus does.
Right.
I was thrilled to see it. And then he decides to hold a big games.
Yes, so now we have the games. It's not actually a big games because they're not in Rome. It's just a local games.
Right.
But it's like they make Asterix walk through. It was kind of funny how it kept amping up. Like there's, it starts with snakes dropped on him. Then there's a lion. Then there are alligators. Yep. There's an elephant. I was trying to remember the other 3 elephant movies we had. Telugu Superman, Sheena, and there was a third one because we had already declared that they were an all-star.
Whoa!
But this is our 4th elephant movie. I can't remember what the other one was. I meant to check before.
Is it a real elephant, though? I couldn't tell if it was an actual
I think in some shots it is, in some shots it isn't.
Because it's an African elephant, not an Indian elephant.
Okay.
Because African elephants can't be trained.
Okay.
Whereas Indian elephants can.
Okay.
Although there were African elephants in Sheena. I think it's African elephants are difficult to ride.
Okay.
Anyway, it doesn't matter. What was the third one?
Can't remember. Somebody please
write in. Yeah. Let us know.
Please remind us. Maybe I'll have to go back and listen to the Sheena episode. I meant to and I didn't.
Detritus says that basically it's kind of like a obstacle course of animals.
Yes.
A circuit of animals. And if he gets to the front of the room where Detritus is, then he will have his freedom. He says no one ever makes it.
No one's ever done it.
Obelix says, I bet Asterix will make it. And then Detritus bets him 1,000 to 1 against his salary that he won't make it. This looks like it's going to be a plot point. No, it doesn't pay off. Because Asterix, of course, makes it.
Yeah, of course.
And then we think, Detritus is going to have to bankrupt himself to pay Obelix.
Oh, yeah, that's right. The bet is gone. But he was a spy.
Nothing happens.
You're not going to keep your bet with a spy.
But why put that in then? Anyway, so as you say...
So he during this, Asterix keeps trying to yell out the code phrase to Obelix, but like spiders go in his mouth at one stage when he goes in the spider pit, etc., this kind of stuff. Finally, he gets...
Asterix, they say no one's ever survived the spiders. It's a big pit of spiders.
Yeah.
Like 300... They actually had spiders.
Whoa, okay.
I don't know what's
happening. There's some obvious CG shots here, but...
They got about 300 real spiders for this scene.
Okay.
Most of which died of cold.
Okay.
Because this scene was shot in Germany. in Munich, actually. They with 300 extras.
Whoa!
All of those guys.
Whoa!
Yep, they were
Again, it's all on screen.
Yep.
Yeah.
Those 300 extras who apparently were selected through a competition.
Wow. Okay.
Go figure. But as well as these 300 extras, it wasn't 300 spiders, it was about 100 to 200 real-life spiders that they got for these scenes, and some of which were crawling around on the actor or on the stunt double.
Okay.
But it's mostly very obvious CG. And Asterix is kind of like submerged in this trench of spiders, and Detritus says, "No one's ever survived the spiders, that's it." And then Asterix just walks out the other end of the trench.
Yes.
How did...
He's awesome.
Again, I just kept waiting. How's Asterix going to outsmart spiders? Because Asterix always has a plan. The spiders just decided not to bite him.
Yeah, he's not on the potion or anything. Is he? Is he on the potion?
Nope, he's not. He's run out of potion.
Right. So we don't know. They just forgot that the spiders are supposed to be the final lethal challenge of the animal gauntlet.
I'm baffled.
Yeah.
The spiders that were actually crawling around on had their fangs dipped in wax so that they couldn't bite.
Oh wow! Wow.
I'd have been apparently the actor who plays Asterix, I forget his name.
Christian Clavier.
Christian Clavier. When he read this, he just said, "Whoa, I'm out."
Right.
And no bullshit. Apparently, I think his mother had worked with the same animal trainer that was going to be in charge of the spiders. Okay. And she said, "No, he's reliable. Okay. You'll be okay."
Okay.
And he said, "All right."
Wow.
You remember in one scene the alligators. So after all this is resolved, Asterix and Obelix escape by jumping on an alligator and surfing across to the other side of the trench. They were all real alligators.
Okay.
With the exception of one, which was a fake alligator, the one they jumped on.
Yeah.
Asterix's stuntman jumped on the real alligator.
Whoa! Holy cow!
Survived with minimal injuries, apparently.
Wow.
I don't know if that shot made it in the film, but yeah, that's wild. How do you jump on a real alligator?
Yeah. Holy cow, that is crazy. Right, so once Obelix hears the code phrase, he goes all out. Yeah. They manage to escape. While they're escaping, they grab Getafix. They also grab a prisoner in an iron mask. Yes. A man in the iron mask.
Who could he be?
They're like, well, any enemy of the Romans is a friend of ours, so come with us. They take him. They get him back to the village. They take the mask off. It's Caesar.
Of course.
And Caesar's kind of like, look, you saved me from those guys that are trying to betray me.
Help me, reinstate me, and I'll give you liberty. I'll give you autonomy within the empire. You won't pay any taxes. Yeah. And I'll disband those camps. And the Gauls say, yeah, that's a good deal. Yeah. So I guess no more Asterix?
Yeah. So the Romans attack there's a huge
for no reason Detritus has mustered the legions and are sending them against the Gaulish village.
He's really pissed off, I guess.
He has no reason to do this. He wants to go to Rome and be proclaimed and be the new Caesar. Yeah. Why is he attacking the Gaulish village?
Yeah. Yep. Not sure.
He doesn't know Caesar's there.
That's right. He doesn't know Caesar's there.
That would be one reason why.
I guess he's just angry that these Gauls have thwarted him again.
We never even get a scene where he says that, though.
No,
how easy would that have been to put in?
That is true. That is true.
We're just supposed to accept, this is where the Gauls are, so this is where the action's going to happen.
But this time there's too many of them.
Yeah, and they only have so much potion because Getafix has been away, he hasn't brewed more potions.
So they need some special potion. There is a way to do it, but they need to get it from the old wizard, Methuselix. So they go down into this cave, they find the old guy, they get the secret for the new potion, and the new potion actually creates duplicates. Yeah. So every time Asterix drinks one, he splits into two, the two drink them, they split into 4,
Obelix is allowed to drink the potion too. Yeah.
Yes, so those two guys, so now we've got a legion of Asterixes and Obelixes to attack the Roman legion. They have victory. There's a big feast. Yeah. Celebratory feast. Obelix makes a duplicate of Fabula, thinking because she's going to marry her fiance. Yeah. But this movie, like every Hollywood movie, doesn't understand what a clone or a twin is.
This is horrifying.
They have two different. Why does the duplicate want to marry Obelix and not marry her own fiance?
I don't know, but this is horrifying. So the duplicates have their own consciousness.
Yes,
and they don't.
And they think they're the original.
They don't know whether or not they're original. And after a few minutes, an hour or so,
they turn into soap bubbles.
Yeah. So they die.
Yeah.
So you create these living beings with consciousness
Yes.
and agency,
Yes.
and then they die an hour later.
Yes.
This is horrifying.
Yes.
And the movie just kind of plays it for laughs.
Yes.
I was
Doesn't think about it much as it doesn't think about the fact that these two have different identities, even though they're the same person less than a second apart. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's just wild.
Yes.
That's pretty much it. Then
so it's Obelix's birthday. There's a weird musical number here.
Yeah.
They sing for his birthday, but also the Romans. There's a shot where the Romans seem to be retreating from their settlement.
Yeah. Well, they've Caesar has closed the camps, the four camps.
Okay, right.
But then for Obelix's birthday, which he would have no reason to know about, he sends a cohort, I suppose.
Yeah, like 20 legionaries, but wrapped up in a bow tie.
Yeah. With Gaius
Bonus.
Gaius
Bonus.
with his horrible face in the center, and then Obelix has him punch him so that he can punch him back.
Yes. But, okay, I didn't understand this because the Gauls do not take prisoners. They beat these guys up and then they go home. They beat them up in the woods and they go home. They don't take Roman prisoners. So what good is a present of 20 Roman prisoners?
So that Obelix can bash them up.
Have someone to beat up?
Yeah, that's it. That's pretty much it. It doesn't make sense. Why would Caesar send 20 guys just to get beat up? Why would Caesar do something like that?
Yeah. They could have left the Caesar plot and picked up one of the other plots. You know what I mean? What about that money? Bring that money back
where's the money?
In the final shot.
Beat up Prolix for hypnotizing Asterix. That guy got away scot-free.
Yeah.
What kind of story lets this guy steal all the Caesar's treasury? Why isn't Caesar considering
Okay, well so we're at the end of the movie. So here's the thing. We've got this property, which is beloved by 393 million people. You got to make a movie. People have read the books dozens of times over and over again. Their copies are beat up.
Yep.
They know them backwards and forwards, much like you do. You don't even have to be in France.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So now you're going to pick and choose what are you allowed to leave out? What do you have to put in? What can you do shorthand with? It's very tricky. It's not like, when Batman came out, 89, my parents didn't really know anything about Batman.
Right.
They'd be like, what's this? You got to explain all that stuff to them. You had a different situation with this, I think. I think anybody coming in here...
No one watching this movie is coming in dry.
Yeah, so it's really hard to know what the expectation is, and if you smash these plots together, are they going to notice that there are seams? Are they going to notice that, the treasure box plot disappeared, stopped, and then suddenly the Druid Conference plot just started, which usually would come at the front of the volume. And here it's in the middle of the movie.
Yeah.
Are they even going to notice that, or is it going to be just like, because they're just so used to it, do you know what I mean? Like, it feels like you would almost not notice because you're just so used to that thing always being in the corner.
I suppose. For me, it'd been so long since I read them that all I could see was that this story didn't make sense.
Right.
That it was clearly 4 different stories kind of hammered together.
Yes. There's plot elements from all these books, 4 or 5 different books, that audiences would recognize. That's from that one, that's from that one.
I think it's literally they weren't confident enough, I suppose, to tell an original story or to adapt a single volume.
Or would it have been offensive to the audience? Would they assume that the audience would be offended by a original story?
Maybe.
Versus having an album.
But then why not just adapt? It's just such a mess, this movie.
Yeah.
And, And it's disappointing how little it is like a Goscinny kind of plot.
Yes.
Asterix seldomly does anything clever.
Yeah. Obelix
is stupid to the point of ridiculousness. I have a problem with Depardieu's performance as Obelix.
Yeah.
I don't like it. It doesn't feel like... First of all, I don't really like his costume.
Okay.
They've tried to make it look like Obelix's costume, I suppose, except it kind of looks like Wallace from Wallace and Gromit inside those robotic pants.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, to do his belly, they've made a kind of... It seems like almost like papier-mâché trousers that he's kind of swimming in.
Mm-hmm.
And he's often resting his hands on top of them. And you can kind of see that Depardieu is a husky dude.
Yeah.
But he's still swimming in these pants.
So, do you think they've tried to be too comic accurate and they should have been a bit more flexible with this kind of thing? Or should they have hired a bigger actor? Or what do you think the solution is to this?
I think a better story, for one.
Oh, well, I'm just talking about the things like the pants.
Oh, okay. Oh, gee. Oh, I think they've tried too hard to make it look comic accurate there. Okay. I'm not sure Obelix is a character that you can.
This is the thing, isn't it? This is the question.
Yeah.
And it's the question of the podcast.
Yeah.
From day one, I've been like, what if you, and it's especially strong with something like Asterix.
Yeah.
Not so much with Batman or Superman, but what if you have something that has a very distinct visual thing that is ingrained in people's minds?
Yes.
Asterix looks a certain way. It looks the Uderzo way.
Yes.
You can do that in animation, but once you go into live action, you have a real question of adaptation here, of how are you going to handle this?
It's funny because they've cast character actors who have facial features that are so cartoony.
Yes, absolutely.
And yet that wasn't enough. They felt compelled to build this set that looks exactly like the Gaulish village. And that's not enough. We have to dress them in outfits that look exactly like the comic book outfits. And that's not enough. You have to put wings on Asterix's helmet. You've got to have an oddly solid pair of pants for Gérard Depardieu to march around in. I feel like you needed to wind it back a little before you got to that point.
Yeah.
Because then I know I'm watching a film. When Depardieu's pants don't bend, I know I'm watching a film. But at what point do you stop? That's the question. I suppose that's the question of the podcast too. At what point do you stop?
Yeah.
At what point do you change? And at what point do you how far do you stay the same? And at what point do you start improvising?
Yes.
It
and
really
also, if you can't stay the same because that style is so distinct and specific.
I think something like Little Abner, where. With Little Abner, they just took... it was a musical before it was the film. And they've really just used the same costumes and the same sets. God, that's a flashback. What was that, like the second film we did?
It was pretty early.
At the time, I think I kind of complained about how lazy that was. But here, I don't know. The village does look good.
Yeah.
But does it look too good?
No, the village doesn't look too good, but maybe the costumes are a problem.
Okay, that's fair.
So do we have any more trivia that we want to cover?
Oh, yeah, heaps.
Get to votes?
All right. Okay, so this film cost 275 million francs in 1999, which was about 48.6 million US dollars, making it a very expensive movie by French standards. Both the English and French Wikipedia articles say that it was the most expensive French film made up to that point.
Okay.
I'm not sure exactly what criteria they're using because The Fifth Element came out 2 years earlier and had a budget twice as much. And that was a French film.
Is it considered a French film?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But I imagine maybe they mean French language, because obviously Fifth Element is. But then the most expensive French film of all time is Valerian.
Ah, okay.
And that's not in French.
No.
So go figure.
Yeah.
I think probably they meant in 1999 this was the most expensive French language film of all time. It was also the biggest. It was a success.
Okay.
It made, so if it cost 48.6 million, it made about 101.6 million.
Okay.
So not 3 times, but twice the budget.
Yeah.
Definitely considered a
Enough
success.
for 4 sequels.
Damn right.
Yeah.
Which have gone on to be, pretty much every year they came out, the most expensive French film ever made.
Right. Okay.
Even today, after Valerian, the second most expensive French film ever made is Asterix and the Olympic Games, which I dare say we'll eventually come to.
Yeah.
Certainly, I'd be happy to read some more Asterix comics. Almost all of that was made in France.
Okay.
I think it made like $1.5 million in the US.
Oh, okay.
Maybe a small, like a theatrical, very small theatrical release. I mean, it's in French.
Yeah. I'm surprised it made any money. I'm surprised it got an international release.
But it certainly did good business in France.
Yeah.
Depardieu was keen to play Obelix. He, in fact, signed an agreement with the producers that they wouldn't make the film without him, and it had to be postponed briefly so that he could be in the role. And he's since reprised it, as we pointed out many times.
Yeah.
3 roles were reserved for German and Italian actors. So Caesar, as we mentioned. Impedimenta, Vital Statistic's wife, she was also a German actor.
Okay.
I don't know if her dialogue was dubbed or not. And, of course, Detritus, played by Benigni. Actually, I've written it in my notes. Impedimenta's dialogue was dubbed.
Okay.
However, Benigni speaks fluent French.
Right.
Unsurprising. Italians often do.
Yeah.
My Italian sister-in-law does.
Yeah.
So, presumably he has an Italian accent, but I dare say it just adds to the comic quality.
Although that's an interesting variation from the comic, because in the comic they can't speak to each other. Often they show up they can't speak to the Goths. They don't know what language they're speaking.
It's true, but the Romans and the Gauls always speak the same language.
Right. Yes. Right.
Which
of
is
course,
an interesting...
Yes.
I guess, again, it's just meant to show that the Romans aren't really a foreign country.
Right.
They're more a force of modernity.
Yeah.
Yep. I'll only mention Falbala.
Okay.
Falbala. She was played by a famous French novel called Laetitia Casta, who has had some acting roles, but primarily known as a model.
Okay.
Also, she gets my vote as French's thing.
Yes.
We've decided ever since Katia Lointain, we've decided that we've got a category French's thing that happened in this movie. I would say Ms. Laetitia Casta's breasts are the French's thing that happened in this movie.
I think you're probably right.
I mean, this is ostensibly, I suppose, a movie that's all ages, and Obelix's love interest is wearing a very low-cut top.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be my vote. Any...
I think that's probably... I hadn't thought about it, but that sounds like I can't think of anything that's more really obviously French in this movie than that.
Did you notice this is the second week in a row that one of the actors is wearing lifts? So last week it was Non.
Okay,
He was playing Non. This week it's Depardieu to make him a little taller as Obelix.
Huh. I did notice that Asterix wasn't like short.
He wasn't short enough.
Yeah.
They did their best.
Yeah. They really did.
All right, well, shall we do our votes then?
Yes. Okay, these comics are classics. Can't believe I didn't read more of them a long time ago. And the writing that we talked about, but the art is also just really
the art's
amazing.
Lovely.
Yes.
The writing is really good.
Yeah.
The puns are constant.
Yes.
A testament to the ability of the translators. Yeah. It must have been, I'm sure it was hilarious in French as well. Very engaging stories.
Yes.
Goscinny, as I said, a master of this genre.
Yeah.
Just page after page of ramping up and hilarity. There's the fun Latin wordplay, and as an adult, I particularly enjoy the way that it's engaged with the great texts of antiquity.
Yes. Yes.
As I mentioned, some phrases from Asterix have made its way into common language in French. Right, I mentioned fell into the magic cauldron. There's also the expression irréductibles Gaulois, that is indomitable Gauls. That now means any small group of people that refuse to be displaced or give up, especially when everyone else has since moved on.
Right. Oh, interesting.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to reading more of these for the future episodes that we've got coming up.
Same.
Okay, now, this movie. I've been really flip-flopping on it. Okay. I don't think it's all bad. I mean, it's visually, it's impressive, I think, even with the occasionally bad CGI. I mean, when they punch a Roman and they go flying into the air, it's not supposed to be like Neo punching Agent Smith.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It's
supposed to be more comical?
Yeah, and I forgave it.
Okay. You do make a good point. I mean...
But yes, you're right. The plot's all over the place. And I think they were trying to satisfy readers of the comic with the plot by putting in all these elements. But I think the result is that it doesn't all add up the way it's supposed to. Mm. It's not a single unit. Why could they just make the first book?
I completely agree. I don't...
I guess because Obelix goes away for quite a chunk of it. But I don't know.
That's right. I'm going to withdraw my complaints about the effects because, as you say, it's not really fair to judge by Matrix standards. Mm. And also it's meant to be cartoony. I step back from that complaint. However, I maintain that, as you've just said, the plot is problematic.
Yeah.
We've got several stories going on, some of which just peter out and don't go anywhere.
Yeah. So I'm going to say it's a borderline nay for me. Like, it's nay, but... there was stuff I like, and I'm actually looking forward to the others.
They might get better. I think they narrow the focus.
It's not a nay to the point that, oh my god, I don't want to watch 4 more of these. It's like, okay, maybe they'll be good.
That's fair. It's also a nay for me, but there are certainly things I liked. I liked some of the hideous Frenchmen. I liked the sets.
Yeah.
I like the costumes.
Yeah.
However, films live or die on their plots, and the plot in this film was awful. And also, I must admit, I have one point of nervousness, which is that I don't really think Depardieu is a good Obelix.
Right. Well, we'll
see.
He's
going to be back. Well, maybe I don't know. I don't understand the way he plays it is kind of really. I'm not quite sure how to describe it.
I didn't have that issue with his performance.
Okay.
Personally, I have a feeling he grew up reading these books.
Yeah. Well, clearly, I'm sure he's thrilled to play the role. He seems so shy.
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean.
I think of Obelix being a bit more rambunctious, a little more energetic. He seems really hesitant and pussyfoots around a lot.
Right.
Something jars about Depardieu's performance for me, but it may get better. But the plot.
Was that are we in adaptation or was that?
I want to get to adaptation now. Okay, the plot.
Okay.
So my problems with the adaptation mostly come down to problem with the storytelling.
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, Asterix seldomly outfoxes anyone the way he would in the comic. Same with Getafix. Mm-hmm. Examples. All right, so the potion brewing scene, which I already mentioned. In the comics, they would have outsmarted the Romans. Yeah. They would have brewed a fake potion.
Yeah.
They'd have had some plan where Obelix would come in or Asterix would trick them. They'd be tricking them into bringing fake ingredients. The Romans would always be at their mercy. You know, there's always this... The Gauls are always causing mayhem in the Romans' carefully organised world. Yet in the film, they're always just at the mercy of the Romans, really. And the whole way to resolve their situation that they're in is for Asterix to get an earshot of Obelix.
Yes.
That doesn't feel like an Asterix plot
you're
to
right
me.
about that.
Similarly, when the Romans should always end up being humiliated in some way, shape, or form, right? And it's only... Take the finale, the big battle at the end where Detritus is attacking the Gaulish village for no reason. The Gauls should have some... The Romans should be totally outfoxed in some way. There should be some plan. Instead, we have riddles in the dark.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, Methuselix.
With Methuselix instead of Gollum.
Demand some riddles that be answered by Asterix in order to give him the secret of the deluxe potion.
And Getafix are utterly at the mercy of this Gollum-like guy that lives in a cave.
Yeah.
Doesn't feel like Asterix to me. But that's the best that the screenwriter could come up with. The stakes.
Yeah.
The stakes here are going to be, they have to do, a gnome is going to ask them questions.
Yeah.
No. So for me, that's a nay.
Okay.
Gremlins in caves and millions of spiders is not Asterix for me. Sorry.
Yeah. I am inclined to agree, but they've done such a good job on the visuals. They've got half of it.
Yeah.
They got half of it.
Sure.
And they've botched half of it. They've put too much attention on one thing and not on the other. But it would have been a big concern at the time. Like, how are we going to put this on screen? They would have had to really focus on that. Yeah. And they've kind of dropped the ball on the plot. Yeah.
To be fair, I've completely ignored the enormous amount of effort they put into sets and costumes. But for me, it's always that's as. I mean, any faithful listener will know that's generally a second-tier preference for me. I really want things to be engrossing and interesting, different, and I feel like it's different, but not in the right way.
Okay, please rate, review, subscribe on whatever your platform is. Please join us or leave a comment on Facebook or Instagram or Blue Sky. You can also send us an email at the email address which is in the show notes. Please join our Patreon at patreon.com/comicbookmovieoblivion. All one word. We do need the money for hosting fees and batteries.
Hopefully this works.
Jesus Christ. The batteries ran out on my recorder. Please, Patreon. Okay. Next week, we're going to have a very late tribute to Jules Feiffer, because at the time that Jules Feiffer passed away, I did not realize that he actually had a movie based on some of his comics from his Village Voice comics from the 60s.
Not Popeye. Right?
Not Popeye. This is a movie called Bernard and Huey from 2017, starring David Koechner and Jim Rash, and someone we've seen before.
Stay tuned for that. And if you've forgotten who we're talking about, stay tuned for that.
Yeah, too. By the way, this movie is very hard to find. I had to buy a DVD. Wow. Again, please join our Patreon, because I could not find this online anywhere. I had to buy a physical copy, and I think that's about all the setup. Hard to find the comics as well. There is a book of these comics that came out, a collection in the 60s called The Unexpurgated Memoirs of Bernard Telgemeier or something like that. You can find it on Archive if you go looking for it. And that's about all the setup I can give you. Might be tricky to find the feature.